Hey, so does anybody remember what we talked about last week?
Yeah, we talked about
Calvin. We're gonna say, you gotta say out loud.
we talked about that kills stuff.
Yes. Love that. Tree killer. Yeah. Anybody else remember what we talked about? Some of the stuff that we looked at? Yeah. Totally. Yeah, it talked about how God created us to be free. And how sin really more, we think it's us living free and doing what we want to do, but really it's we're enslaved to our own desires. And God really wants us to live a free life, but it really takes doing it His way, right? Anybody else want to share with some other hand over here? Say your hand.
I was going to say sin.
Say the same.
Sin.
Sin. Good stuff. Not good stuff. Yeah, not good.
Yeah, I think, so I feel like it was really powerful when we talked about the ways that it separates us from God, the way that it, like, puts us in chains. Yeah, I think it was just really cool to focus on, like, just how detrimental, like, sin can be, and even, like, how we talked about, like, you know, there can be outward sin, but then also the stuff that's, like, in our hearts, too, that, like, can maybe go overlooked, but I also thought it was really cool talking about like how we can be set free from that too.
Totally. Yeah. It was really good.
One thing that really stood out from last week was about the great nations, like throughout history that has evolved out of their generations because of the sexual behavior or something like that.
Yeah, we talked about how sin, legitimately.
And then you guys mentioned like the study. Well, I actually didn't mention what the study was, but you said that it was some type of like research that this person was doing. It wasn't even a Christian. How in the third generation, like the nation was small. You know, we're in that third generation now.
Totally. Yeah, we talked about how sin isn't just this. Sometimes you grow up and think about sin, it has this religious context where you think sin is just something that's bad and that God doesn't want for me. Whereas I really learned that sin is actually something that God's like, no, this is poison. Like just as much as a mom hates a disease in her child, it's the same thing that God hates about sin in us. It's not about who we are, but it's more like, man, He knows that it's going to kill you if you're not careful. And so He set up the world to be a better place. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that now. You guys have heard me talk a lot, so I'm hoping that this will be more of a discussion and stuff, because I know you're kind of bored of hearing me speak. And so I'm going to try to have, I know it's never crossed my mind ever, but we're just going to have a little discussion right now, open up the Bible and look at it. I'm hoping that, we're going to have a lot of lessons this upcoming weekend. We've had a lot. I thought, on Friday, for those of you guys that weren't there, we talked a lot about materialism and what materialism does to our culture, what it does to us individually, then also what it does to the world around us. And that was really sobering for me, even kind of doing some of the research and studying some of that sort of stuff. And as we talked about a lot of topics, hoping that this one, we can kind of go a little bit deeper on stuff we talked about last time, but also that it can be something that really bonds us a little bit closer together as we talk about it, and something that sets us up for the retreats. It's something that's kind of a glue here in this part of the semester for what we talked about, and also leading up to the retreat. Sound good? So what we're going to talk about tonight, the title is called Rooted in Truth. All right, Rooted in Truth. It's a cool graphic online that has the roots come out of truth. All right? But go to 2 Samuel chapter 11.
Doing it.
Let's go. 2 Samuel 11. I want to ask first, was there ever a time in your life where, when you were a little kid, when you lied to your parents, or when you hid something from your parents? And then funny story, Graham.
I was asked by my parents if I had brushed my teeth. I had not, and they felt my toothbrush and it was dry. And then next time I lied about that, I just put the toothbrush under the sink.
Yes. Smart. Brilliant. Chase.
Yeah, I wasn't a young kid. I was like 17 or 18. I was like 17. And I just had an operation where I couldn't get the body part wet. And my friend's like, hey, do you want to go tubing for my birthday? And I'm like, why not? Let's go for it. And my dad's like, you can go, just don't get in the water. And I'm like, yeah, of course. sharks. And so I obviously didn't do that, and I went into the ocean, into the water. And my friend comes over the next day, and he's like showing my family, oh, look at those pictures of us, look at those pictures of us. And there's a picture of me face planting in the water. And my dad's like, hey, Chase, come here. And so I'm in the kitchen, my friends are in the living room, and he's like, what is this? And I'm like, it's Photoshop. And this man, I've never seen him more angry in my life. He's like, you're gonna stand right there and do not move. If you cry, I'm gonna beat you harder. And so he punches me like 5 times, more than he could. And my mom was crying. It was bad. But it was, my friends were like, these are rich, right?
That's awesome. TT.
Oh yeah.
And we would go like every couple of weekends for like a camping trip. There was one weekend, I think we had been outside, we went to the pool and like played and stuff, and we came back, and my mom was like, my parents were really adamant about us showering very often. My sister just didn't like to shower.
Sure.
As one does. And so they were like, hey, like go wash, whatever. And so I was like, should I go shower first? So she went to the bathroom, was like, okay, I'll shower. She went to the bathroom, turned on the water, and just sat for like 15 minutes, and then came out completely dry in a towel. And my dad was like, did you shower? She was like, yeah. And then they both were like, no, you didn't shower, go back. And so she went back, turned on the water, my mom went into the bathroom, she was just sitting on the carpet. The steam.
Right, the steam gets me. Right. Exfoliate in the.
Yeah, we like made it work for like years.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, Leo, I don't know.
When I was younger, I like always watched my dad like when he shaved his like face. So I was like, oh, that'd be really cool about having like hair and shave, except for my eyebrows. But I don't want to shave my eyebrows. But I have 4 little brothers. So I waited till late at night and I went and I shaved everybody's eyebrows. I didn't shave mine. And so like my mom, like so we woke up, not my parents. No, not my parents. So like my brother. So my mom woke up in the morning and she was like looking at our kids and she was like, and she was like, who did this? And I was like, I don't know, this is so crazy.
Oh my goodness. We learned a valuable lesson. Don't be Aaliyah's roommate. That is savage. Savage. Actually, Brie, I want to hear yours because your parents in the room, it's not being more of a confession than a.
I was trying to choose one because I have so many.
So many.
I was thinking of the canvas one. So my sister is like pretty artistic, so she would draw doodles as a kid. And one day I decided it would be fun for some reason. Sitting at our kitchen table, had a fork, and I carved into the kitchen table a picture in the style that my sister draws. So it looks like truly my sister drew carved a face into the picture. It was like a cartoon girl. Just right in the middle of the table. And so Candace, my sister, or my mom sees it and was like, hey Candace, it's clearly Candace's style. Candace was like, I don't remember doing this. Like, I have no recollection. I'm like, but that's my drawing. Like, that's how I draw. And I'm just sitting there like, just evil. I don't tell her, ever, okay? So this is like, I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. 10 years later, I was like, we were talking about it. And I was like, okay, we're past it now, right? Like, it'll be funny, right? So I'm like, Candace, guess what? Like, I do that drawing. I have a fork and like, and my sister started weeping for 10 years. I've had this guilt on my head.
what's awesome is that most of the time, like, you just can't fool your parents, you know? Like, when you try, your little 6-year-old self thinks you're all sly, you know?
Yeah.
And you can't pull it over. Like, we know you didn't brush your teeth, you know? I can tell. It's not even on your toothbrush, it's like there's junk in your teeth. And so, you know, or just taking a towel and they're completely dry, you know? And so, it's sort of the same thing with God, right? Like, we think we're slick, you know, and we can kind of hide things, or we do things like, oh, God's not going to know about this, you know? Or Jonah, right, when he runs away from God, is like, oh, I'm going to escape God. And that, you know, it's tough when he's omnipresent, you know, and stuff like that. It's a little bit of a tough run away there. And so, we're going to read a story here that's a little bit more intense than, you know, not brushing your teeth, but is something to me where a guy's trying to hide something from God and gets exposed. And just a little bit about that story. Okay? So let's go to 2 Samuel 11 in verse 1. It says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, remember what David is? He's a king. So what should he be doing? He should be out of war, right? Before this, you know, 1 Samuel and first 10 chapters, 2 Samuel, it's basically David's story. Remember what David was known as? The man after God's own heart. And so we see David do so many incredible things. This right here is kind of one of his, it's probably his weakest moment. In a time where we are grateful for stories like this because it shows us that even in the midst of trying our best and doing as much as we can for God, people make mistakes. And God can really use those people, right? But it should be a war. David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, "I am pregnant." It's kind of an intense story right here. Now, David, not one of his finer moments. At what points right here do you see, I mean, obviously we know David makes a huge mistake. At what points could he have stopped himself? Okay, after she knew that he had a husband, he could have said right there, "Ain't a good idea." Yeah.
After.
Yeah, at the very beginning, he was off doing what he was supposed to do. He stayed home. You wonder why he stayed home, right? Maybe it was laziness, didn't want to go out and fight, felt like, you know, they don't need me. Who knows, right? But I find that usually I'm at my worst when I'm kind of in my lazy mode, or when I know I should be doing something productive or something that's good for me, and I tend to, I won't worry about that this time. It's usually when I tend to be at my worst, you know. But Chase, you still.
Yes, the moment he realizes it's his best friend's wife.
Okay, yeah, it's one of his men, you know, in his army. That's a guy he probably knows, has seen, and put maybe in the army and trained or something like that, right? That's a big deal. Ross, yeah.
I was gonna say, you know, the moment he just saw her, he turned away. If he had turned away and walked off.
Totally. Right when he saw her, could have easily turned away. Grant?
He didn't have to send his people to go snoop, like, stalk her.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that takes an extra level of, like, you're wanting to do that at that point, where you say, okay, I want you guys to go get her. I mean, that takes, you could have easily stopped yourself there. Somebody else have a hand? Anyone else? Yeah, I mean, there's many, many ways, and many times right here where David could have stopped himself. Don't you find yourself doing that a lot, where there's like, you know there's something that you're not supposed to do, and then there's many, where you kind of, you mess up and you look back and you're like, man, there are so many ways, so many times I could have stopped myself from doing that right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna tell stories, but, you know, different stories of you trying to do something. I remember trying to do little pranks with my sister and knowing it wasn't a good idea, and I could have stopped myself at, you know, many different moments, right? And sometimes it's helpful to kind of say, man, what are my tendencies, like, and how can I stop myself at the very beginning? Because if I just kind of keep going one by one, I think I'm gonna stop, but what really happens is that after a while you just gain momentum and you end up kind of falling where you could have stopped yourself way at the beginning, right? And so what ends up happening, right? David gets scared. He says, man, I just got her pregnant. I need to cover this up. And so, for the sake of time, we're not going to read it. But basically, he says, man, I got to get Uriah, her husband, to come back home. And I have to get him to sleep with her so that he thinks it's her baby. That's like messed up. You know what I'm saying? And so, Uriah comes back. And hey, he says, hey, David says, you've been doing a great job. Just go home, celebrate with your wife. And then you can go back out there later. And Uriah's response is, how can I go and celebrate with my wife when all my men are out there fighting? And so what does he do? He sleeps on the doormat outside of his home. He says, I'm not going to go in because I care too much about my men right now that are fighting. And I think, man, something, that right there, we have a lot to learn from Uriah, right? Where we don't have any, it's so easy for us to kind of have privilege or think that we can do something even when nobody else is doing it. And Uriah's heart right here, his integrity, to say, no, I'm not even willing to do that because that would dishonor my men. Wow, what a heart and a character right here. That totally, I think, the writers here, when they talked about this, did that on purpose. They showed Uriah's heart compared to David's heart. And so, does that stop David? No. He says, you know what, now I got to get Uriah killed. And so he says, sends out a message to the general, basically says, hey man, when he's out, and put him on the front lines, and then when he's out there at the last second, pull everybody back besides him, that he's the one that gets killed. He ends up dying, and report gets back to David that, Uriah's dead. How do you think Bathsheba's feeling right now, knowing that her husband just died? Man, gosh, what a terrible feeling. But now she has no husband, so now she has to go. David needs to take care of her. And so this kind of happens, right? What's the very last sentence of chapter 11?
David has done displeased the Lord.
Yes, is with the thing David had done displeased the Lord. We can read the whole paragraph. It says, when Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. Now, that's pretty intense. A lot of mess ups right there. Hopefully, on your worst day, it wasn't as bad as David's worst day, with adultery and murder. Right? That was David's worst kind of moment. And so let's see what happens afterwards. Verse 1 of chapter 12. It says, the Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, hey man, he's like, hey, I want to tell you the story real quick. Okay, there's a story out there, like, you're not going to like it. He says, there were two men in a certain town. One guy was rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. Now, okay, let's see what David thinks. It says, David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. I think it's really easy a lot of times for us to get extremely indignant and mad about things that happen in the world, but then once it comes to us, we don't have that same sort of expectation for ourselves.
Yeah.
We get mad at how people have hurt us. We get mad when somebody else sins against us. We get mad when we see somebody else out there sinning against somebody else. We get mad when there's injustice happening around the world. Yet when we do the same thing to somebody else, we're like, oh, that doesn't matter. That was this situation. We get so mad at other things. I think what God is trying to tell us here is like, man, before you can fix anything in the world out there, you really have to learn how to fix yourself first. And so, and then listen to what Nathan says after David says this. Then Nathan said to David, you are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Boom, he just comes right out and savages him right there. He says, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all of Israel and Judah. And if all of this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Man, you think God can say that to us? It's like, you know what I've given you? You know, the incredible, ability for you to go to school? Or the fact that you have health? or an amazing family right here, or maybe an amazing family at home, or the clothes in your back. He's like, if you wanted more, I would have given you even more. It's like God has really given us everything. This we talked about last week. And then it says, man, verse 9, but why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household, I'm going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes, I will take your wives and give them to the one who's close to you, and you will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all of Israel. There's some serious consequences right here. A lot of times, I really don't think that like God was necessarily like punishing David. I think there's just natural consequences for a lot of our actions. It's kind of the difference, right, between a fish that like jumps out of water and starts kind of flopping around in the dock, and you're like, man, why is God punishing that fish for being out of the water, And it's like gasping for air. And it's not really a punishment, it's more of a consequence of the action that it took. And so the same thing for us, a lot of times sin, like I think right here, he's more saying, hey man, the consequence for that is that, how is that example going to be for your son? And what does his son do? His son is actually the one that goes and steals all of his wives and goes sleeps with them in the middle of broad daylight. And they're like, I think that was because of the example that he set as a dad. So there's a lot of natural consequences that come from our sin. And we could go around and talk about a lot of those kind of things now, like ways we've messed up and we're like, yep, I can see how this led to that and led to this and led to this. So many consequences for what God did, or for what we had done. And how do you think you would have responded right here? Would it have been really easy to just respond defensively? Or to kind of say, well, Nathan, you don't know how I was feeling that day. Or, dude, it's one mistake, who cares? I messed up. Listen to what David says. In verse 13, it says, then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. I'll read it again because Jason's Verse 13 says, then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, what kind of response was that from David right there? It was a humility response. It was a humble response. You don't see any other words. You don't see any other defense. You don't see him trying to explain why he did it. He just said, you know what? You're right. I sinned against the Lord. I think because of David's humility right there, and his quick humility, and saying, you know what? I'm turning myself in. I think this is why he gets this response from Nathan. Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin. Right there. You're not going to die, but because by doing this, you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the Son born to you will die. And we see after this that David basically goes on and he fasts night and day for a long time. Those people are worried about him because he's fasting so much that his son would live. And ends up dying. And when we see David's response, he didn't go over and just say, man, that was a bummer, now I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing. He took time to really deal with his sin, go to God with his sin, and really take time to mourn and fast and ask God for help. What are some of the things that you guys learned from this story right here? What are some of the main takeaways for you that you feel like, man, this is a good learning kind of point? Okay.
I think it makes it very easy to understand.
Shows me that we need people like Nathan to call us out and to kind of show us the standard of what is and isn't acceptable to God, because we're going to miss some pretty big stuff on our own.
I think it just shows how easily these things can spiral in these small things.
Yes.
It's very important for us to not that it's recognize what or recognize
feel like most big sins in our life, they all start off as small little things. And you know, it started off as you watched a movie you shouldn't have been watching. And all of a sudden that turns into you looking at things that you wish you did, you know, on camera or something like that. It started off as you having a negative thought or a critical thought towards somebody. And then later on you're bursting out in anger at them, you know. Or it's stuff that you're just, some funky stuff was going on in your heart, you didn't get open about it, and you're starting just to complain right here. All of a sudden you're just bitter and you kind of like start kind of making accusations towards people in your life or towards ministry because of just, you weren't getting open about things early on, you know. Things you're worrying about a little bit, now all of a sudden things you start worrying about in a massive way, and you start leaving everybody in your relationships, but start off kind of small, you know. So many things like this can happen. Yeah.
I think it's really easy for us to kind of be mad at God, you know, after sinning. And you're like, oh, but I've prayed and I've fasted, and you know, why do I still have to go through this? But I think David he had brokenness even after his child died, and he was still committed to God, which is something not a lot of people do. They just like, oh, okay, well, he died, so I'm done, you know. But he still had that brokenness.
Totally. I think that word brokenness is a little bit of a scary word for us, because I think we live in a world where we want to look so put together. The idea of being broken or mourning is like, oh no, I don't want to mourn, I just want to rejoice, I just want to be happy, I just want to party. And I think mourning and being broken is such an important concept in the scriptures of helping you really get closer and closer to God, you know?
Yeah, I think being humble is only way to sin. It's the difference between godly sorrow and being sorry for yourself. Like that's why Peter, when he said Jesus 3 times, or after he sins in the garden by cutting off the guy's ear, that's why like God brings that to him as righteousness, because he's like, oh, I'm sorry, like you know, he repented about it. Whereas Judas just felt bad for what he did and killed himself. And so I think it's just the difference of really getting over it, like trusting Christ with it, and not trying to be this prideful, cool guy. Really being a cool God versus just trying to make yourself feel better or feel better about yourself, and you just feel bad that you get caught up in your sin.
Yeah, sorry.
I think in the beginning of the chapter, even the fact that he like had the audacity to like look at a woman the way he did, I think it was kind of just commitment issues. And to me, I'm just like, I feel like he was just looking at all these things. He got cocky like that. So but just like looking at your life and just like being okay with where you're at, like God has given you everything that you need, like he has needed, and
Yeah, we talked about that a lot on Friday, right? It's like one of the greatest enemies to the human soul is discontent. You see David, man, is there any other guy that was more blessed in all of Israel than David? But he still wanted more. And I think that's an enemy, you know, for us, that we can still easily fall into that trap of not being content with what God has already given us. But Clint.
Well, I kind of feel like what David did was a choice that he chose to make, and he had to suffer for the consequences, and he could kind of like have trouble dealing with the consequences. So like the lesson I took from that is, if you can't deal with the consequences, don't take the action. Basically what I'm saying is, like, you all heard the saying, you regret yourself. So yeah.
Totally, that's a great thought. Sure.
So I took like God is such a good God. Like if I would like kill David immediately. Yeah, it was totally.
Let's not make your God.
No, so like David was doing like a whole bunch of just like foul and dirty stuff, like stuff with his best friend's wife, got her pregnant, then got him killed, and then like he never like apologized. So it's like, to me, I was like, oh, that's terrible. But then God looks at that and he gives David like a chance, because he knows David has like a heart that is actually humble. And it's not about like any like one thing you do. It's about like your like relationship with him. So yeah, God is like way better than me, and I just think like we're so blessed on God.
Just going off what Jared said, one of my favorite songs was Song 51, and that is like a song that he wrote like after he like had songs to Nathan. And my favorite part of scripture is when it says in verse 17, my sacrifice, O God, is the fruit of
show us his heart, you know, even more. But, yeah, yeah.
I was just gonna say, what you said about our you had so many things like that, but even his response to God, when you said it's so easy to just, you're gonna check out and avoid God in any ways it's possible. David looked to him and he just responded in a couple ways. Son, like, just being very like careful the way that he's getting punished, whether it's humble myself and not avoid God, but actually actually for all the things that he did. But even like thinking about
Well, just to reiterate what Clint said, and also reading this, it also makes me think of Romans 12:19, which reads, "Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to the wrath, where it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord."
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's so many lessons to take away, you know, from this particular passage. Main thing I wanted to get across is which kind of person are you right now in this moment of life? Are you more of a David right now, where you know that you've been hiding some stuff, you know that you haven't been open about some things, you know there's been some sin in your life that you haven't yet really talked to somebody about, or that you have that you refuse to really deal with, that you need someone to kind of call that out, and you need to have a humble response to that? Or are you a Nathan, where you've seen some sin in other people's lives, you've seen some sin in the ministry, and you said, someone else will deal with that. Or I don't really have to worry about that, or I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I just wonder what would have happened if Nathan never came to David, you know? And if he didn't have anybody like that in his life. And I think he kind of looked back and was so grateful for a guy like Nathan in his life that had those kind of conversations with him. And that wasn't afraid. I mean, you could tell Nathan wasn't afraid to talk to him about it. He's like, and he did it in a way that it was gonna like really be most beneficial for him, right? He didn't just come out and say, "You did that," you know? He kind of started with the way to really kind of help him see his need for God. And there might be some things, I think we need more people in here, they're gonna be Nathans. And more people in here, they're gonna like call out people for, "Hey, you're doing this, be careful right there, because gosh, life just isn't gonna go great for you if you start doing it that way." Or, "Dude, you know better than this. Why do you kind of keep getting involved with this kind of stuff? Or why do you keep talking this way when we've talked about it? Or why do you keep kind of not coming to things when you and not showing any kind of commitment when, you know, everybody else is trying to be committed? We need you. You know, like we need a lot more of those kind of people to really have a healthy ministry." But wanted to ask you, what sort of conversations have you had where you can remember kind of a conversation like this in your life that really helped you? Can you remember any conversations you had that were like kind of life changing in this sort of way for you?
Yeah.
Nani?
I can remember my sophomore year, Zoe, who like graduated, I can remember her sitting down and having a really good conversation with me about my pride, and like, because I was definitely in a place where I felt like I knew all the answers, like I didn't need help, like I just felt, I like literally felt like I was alone, and she just lovingly like called out and like asked me about things, like certain situations that she noticed, and I was like, oh wow, like just whoa, like I literally still remember right now. And so I think that was just definitely the conversation that led to like just a lot more pride being revealed that I didn't even realize was there. And so I think that was definitely like a catalyst for like just a lot more healing that needed to happen.
Totally. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't need to be this massive sin in the sense of like you did something, you know, that was murdering somebody, right? But like even that just kind of idea of, hey, you seem a little prideful right now, where you seem like you kind of know all the answers. Like just kind of be humble for a second and watch what God does. And I'm really grateful that Nani decided to be humble, you know, because she's impacted so many of us just from doing that herself, you know. Hey, Grant.
Had some really good conversations about how my shame and self-hatred is just preventing me from basking in the glory of God. Like if God is just this beautiful light on one side of the room, I'm choosing to run into the dark corner and just cry because I'm just so hard on myself and not just choosing to just go to the other side of the room, go be with God that's just available. And I think I needed kind of a hard conversation like that to really see just what I was missing out on.
Yes.
So I remember having had like an older sister in Texas, and basically her calling me out on just like how much I didn't see my need for older people and like why is it Christ in my life and thinking and doing things. Well, it wasn't doing things, but just like making choices on my own and not like seeking out advice and seeking out like counsel before I made decisions. Wasn't super comfortable with that at that time. But I think later on, even realizing my need for that conversation and how much that really did help me in my journey. But yeah.
I think something that I'm still very much like working on, but really, and I had a conversation like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, about just like how much I allow like kind of my emotions and like my self-pity like govern my decisions and govern my like mindset and how much it's like affected just like every part of my life. And how like rather than just like allowing myself to just like sit in the sadness of everything's going on in my life and I'm struggling and I don't like it and it's not fun and I don't like waking up and all that stuff. Rather just like the self, like the gratitude that there are still things I'm really grateful for and like there's still great things happening. I woke up this morning and it's focusing on that and how much that will change like everything. And I think these past 2 weeks have been a lot better because of that. And just like life just is looking a lot better currently. So very appreciative.
Many of my examples are with Brie. Helping me out, for sure. Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, anyway, so it was like my friend group, and basically someone pulled a bunch of us aside, and just like, I forgot this group, it was just like, unwholesome talk and like joking and stuff like that, like just how we interacted with each other, and like, obviously I adore my friends, I love them so much, but just like how, like just sarcasm and stuff like that, and she was just like, what time, she's not cool, like, it's discouraging to other people, I'm just sure it's like, if y'all are trying to reach out to your friends and they see you guys talking to each other like that, like it's not even, like it's not cool, and I remember sitting there and I was being disciple and I was like, dang, like, I felt like I didn't do anything at first, but after I thought about it, I was like, I mean, if I love my friends, then I should be lifting them up, and, I mean, you can joke with people, but it was hard.
Right. We were having a conversation last month. We and I were working with a couple trying to get help with our marriage. And someone, you know, the guy just basically said, Nick, you're being prideful. I was like, thank you so much, you know, because I really need guys like that in my life.
Yeah.
I really need guys that are really gonna help see through that stuff with me and help me really understand those things and make me better, make me more like Jesus. Because I know, right, that those things are a disease to me. And so if someone points that out and says, man, you got a disease right there, dude, and I'm like so grateful, thank you for getting that out of my life, because I don't want that in my life, you know? And so I think what I want you to kind of reflect on is, are you a person that a Nathan would feel comfortable going up to? What I mean by that is, there's a lot of people where you put off the vibe that you're already going to be defensive no matter what people say. And so what happens is people actually don't want to talk to you about it, and they don't actually want to point it out because they're like, I know this person isn't even going to listen. I know they're not really going to respond well, and I know it's just going to be this kind of going back and forth, which just isn't worth my time. And so are you a person that invites people like Nathan into your life? Where you're like, please, is there anything in my life? A great question, right? Is there anything that you see in my life where you're like, man, I really need to grow in this area? I appreciate Chase. He does that with me a lot, and it's really helpful. And it gives me opportunities to express things to Chase that I want to express to him, you know? And I really appreciate that, and I think we've been able to get really a lot closer because of that, you know? And are you a person that is inviting those kind of people in your life, or are you kind of pushing away those people from your life, you know? I remember having a conversation with my cousin Tom, and we had a D group, and we were just kind of talking about ways to get open. So I was kind of getting open about some things I was feeling, some fears I was having. And afterwards, he kind of pulls me aside and he said, Nick, thanks for what you shared. I felt like you were open, but you weren't vulnerable. And he explained that to me and how there's a difference, right, between being open and then being vulnerable. Open is kind of like you can crack the door open for a little bit, but not really kind of let anything in there. We go, oh, I was open, I kind of showed it a little bit. But I feel like vulnerability, right, the definition of that is being like open to attack. Where you are so vulnerable, you don't care about what you look like, and you're open to somebody kind of attacking what they saw. That is the only place where we're going to grow. Is when we're vulnerable, not just kind of being open. And I think a lot of us need to kind of, hey, not care about what we look like. This is kind of one of my deepest weaknesses, is I can care so much about what people think of me. But I can be open about stuff, and I can start like self-correcting myself as I'm talking to them and make it look like why I thought of everything already. As opposed to saying, hey, I messed up, help me out, and letting people really help me out in those kind of ways. But the reason we bring all this up is because this is one of the biggest ways where we are going to get close as a family. Is if we are being willing to have Nathans in our life, and if we're willing to be Nathans to other people in their lives. Yeah. And I think with the retreat coming up, it is such an amazing place to start having some of those conversations. Because I know, I'm 100% sure that there's people in here that need to get open about some things, need to get vulnerable about some things that they're feeling. And I know that there's people in here that saw things in others that they need to have a conversation with them about it. And the retreat is such a safe place to do that. It's such a great place to just sit down and have that kind of conversation. But I wouldn't kind of let too much time go by without having one of those kind of conversations. Because they're so healthy for you, they help you grow, help you learn, help make you better. And so many of the conversations I remember were not necessarily all the good ones. Rex had a lot of good conversations. It was the ones that were like a little bit intense and called me out and really helped me. Those are the ones that were life-changing for me. And I think are going to be life-changing for us in this room if we're going to put ourselves out there to get there. And so I encourage you, have somebody in your life. This week, you're like, hey, what do you see in me? You feel like I need to grow in. How can I learn? What have you seen? And then maybe have a talk with somebody else. Hey, can I share with you some things that I've been seeing in you that maybe I can help you with? And most people, we can pray about those things. I think if we do that, we're going to be blown away by how much closer we get and how much more God is really honored and how much more we can be like him in the world because of who he was. We see David after this moment. We learn a lot from David even after this moment. And I wonder if he would have been taken down if he didn't have those kind of conversations.